Split Decision Podcast, episode number 124, here with my always brilliant and beautiful co-host, the Fight Geek. Fight Geek, how you doing today, bro?
Doing excellent. Happy to be back talking fights with you, Phil. How you doing?
Thank you. Doing well. There's a lot of fun stuff to discuss tonight. So, folks, here's what's on tap for today. First, we're going to start with my opening question for Fight Geek. After that, we're going to do a quick recap of the UFC Vegas Hermansen versus Strickland card. Then it's on to preview and picks for UFC 271. And then my favorite section of all, listener questions and more. So, Fight Geek, let me start off the episode with this sort of unique question for you. In regards to 271, we've got Adesanya, Whittaker 2. Now, assuming that Adesanya wins, I know that's a big assumption. Don't worry, folks. We'll get into that more in detail later. But assuming that for the sake of this question, my question is simple. Who do you think will deserve the next title shot? Assuming, of course, that Adesanya gets past Whittaker, because I don't know if you saw today, but Derrick Brunson admitted recently that he only has 2 fights left no matter what. One of them is against Cannoneer, and I think he's hoping for one shot for the title. But he said he's only got 2 fights left. So do you think that takes him out of the title shot running? And ultimately, who do you think deserves that title shot? Again, assuming Israel beats Robert Whittaker this weekend.
Well, there's a lot to break down right there. But in the 185-pound division, I mean, there isn't really an imminent challenger after Robert Whittaker if, per se he were to lose. So that is a tough one. I don't really know what you do there. I mean,
did Brunson hurt his chances by saying he only has 2 fights left? What do you think? I don't know why he admitted it.
I think he probably slightly hurt his chances. Maybe he feels like he's, playing the devil's advocate here and letting the UFC know that if they need a guy, to rematch Israel Adesanya, that after this fight would be the time for him. So maybe it's a power play on his part.
That's a bold strategy, but yeah.
Well, I mean, you think about the list. Obviously, Robert Whittaker, if you assume he beats him for a second time, is not in the running. Marvin Vettori's lost twice. Jared Cannoneer, if he loses to Brunson, certainly won't be there. Costa's not a player.
Strickland.
We'll get into him next,
yep.
But I really don't see that moving the needle as a title fight right now. I think that you're more likely to see Kamaru Usman fight Israel Adesanya, 2 fights from now than Sean Strickland. That's just my opinion.
Ooh, when we got to get into that later, because you've opened a whole can of worms. It's fun.
So yeah, I think Sean Strickland, and we can segue in. Probably still a fight, maybe 2 away versus, the real elites of that division. I know Jack Hermansen had appeared to be elite for a little while there, but, super unimpressed with his performance this weekend.
Yeah.
Just looked stiff, really couldn't get out of the mud. His takedown attempts were pretty lackluster, in my opinion. Just a bad performance by Jack, and Strickland, was able to point fight and get a decision, but really wasn't able to. I mean, would you call that a dominant performance?
I thought it was easily the worst main event since Walker Santos, easily, far and away. And
so
horrible
moving
fight.
off your question and going straight into the recap?
Yep, we're segueing. Okay. What do you mean? We're smoothly segueing.
Oh, okay.
Super smooth.
And I very unsmoothly called it out. Okay,
That's
cool.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree. I thought Sean just the opposite of dynamic, just very straightforward, does the same thing over and over and over and over again. Just not sure that I see enough diversity out of him to really compete versus the elites of the division. I would be interested to see Sean fight someone like Marvin Vettori. If he were to get past Marvin Vettori in impressive fashion, then he would be, in consideration for a title fight.
Who would you have, really quick, who would you have in a Vettori-Strickland matchup? I know my answer, but I want to hear yours.
I would take Vettori easily.
Absolutely.
I think he's a much more well-rounded fighter.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Even though Strickland did show some strengths in this fight and did what he needed to win, the guy's 25-3, obviously very impressive career to this point, but just didn't see the dynamic approach that I think you see from a lot of elite fighters.
Absolutely. The other thing about Strickland that, I mean, just frankly is getting on my nerves is he's always saying, oh, I want, if I could, I'd murder my opponents. Oh, I'd hold the choke until they die. I'd do this, I'd do that. And he says a bunch of other stuff that I can't even repeat.
And he has Jack Hermansen sitting in front of him, and they're essentially,
sparring.
Not going for the kill in any way, shape, or form. So, I mean, yeah, there's a big discrepancy between who Sean Strickland says he is and who he appears to be while fighting.
Yep. Exactly.
We'll have to figure that out because he fights like a defensive point fighter rather than a guy who wants to kill somebody in the ring.
Yeah, that was my biggest issue. I'm glad you mentioned that. That was my biggest issue with the main event was it's not simply, you can say boring and it's like, well, what does that mean? Well, what it means for me is that Strickland was in no way, shape, or form at any moment trying to finish Jack. I mean, just zero effort to get the finish. None.
Yeah, he was just comfortable, like you said, essentially sparring in range that he was comfortable at. I mean, he did put some damage on Jack. I think that's more of a case of Jack just being incredibly stiff and bad on the feet. I don't think he does that to Marvin Vettori, who has a much better striking defense. Obviously, Vittori's a bigger, powerful guy, so he's going to have takedown defense, and he's shown grappling before. So I think Vittori's a big test for Sean Strickland, and I think it makes sense right now.
I like that fight. So then in that scenario, if I know, guys, I know it's a big if Israel were to get past Whittaker, then you would say that you think the next fight for Israel should be the winner of Cannoneer Brunson, I assume.
If it's Brunson, I don't necessarily think Cannoneer. Isn't Cannoneer only on a one-fight?
Yeah, sure, right, but now? Okay, so on that note, playing devil's advocate, let's say Cannoneer were to win this weekend. Let's say that Israel were to win. Who would you match Israel with next? Again,
I think if Israel beats Robert Whittaker, who's a superstar of the game and who he's been reluctant to even rematch, I don't think he's going to be looking back to the pond at 185. I think he's going to look for a super fight. I think that'll look like Kamaru Usman or somebody at 205. I don't think that Israel Adesanya, after vanquishing Robert Whittaker, a Hall of Famer, twice, is going to go back to the well. He's going to go find something exciting, find something that gets him up, because he's essentially going to be in rare air in the 185-pound division.
Absolutely. Okay, so last question before we kind of move on from this fight in our breakdown. So let's say that Robert Whittaker beats Israel Adesanya this weekend. I have a theory, Fight Geek, and I want your thoughts. I have a theory that Kamaru Usman will immediately shoot his hand up and say, oh, I want that. I want that fight. I want Whittaker.
I think he probably would, but I think at that point you have to do the Whittaker versus Izzy trilogy, because that becomes a historically significant fight for middleweight all-time supremacy. Obviously, they're not Anderson Silva, but in this next era after Anderson Silva, these two are trying to determine who's the greatest.
And you think Dana would give that preference over a potential super fight with the number one pound-for-pound fighter, Kamaru, versus, Whittaker potentially?
Absolutely, just because the uniqueness of who Israel and Robert are. I mean, I don't think there's another matchup you can make on the roster where both guys are legitimate Hall of Fame champions.
Right.
I mean, not currently, but maybe a Jan TJ Dillashaw or something like that. But even there's like age problems and, wear and tear on TJ. Where this fight is two of the top three middleweights ever squaring off, in a trilogy. So I think that would trump a lot of what anybody else wanted.
Absolutely. Okay, so it sounds like, before we move on, that we are in agreement that regardless of what happens this Saturday, Sean Strickland did not have a performance that's worthy of a title shot. Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair. Definitely going to move into the top five.
Yep.
Like I said, would love to see him against Vettori, who's proven to be top three, young, vital, all-around fighter. So I think that'd be a big test for him. Plus, Sean Strickland's not going to run his mouth and, back Vettori up. Vettori will meet him with his attitude, and in kind of his brooding style. And I think that would be interesting because Strickland tries to act like a bully, but Vettori really is a bully.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Although he seemed extraordinarily nice to the fans from what I saw from afar at UFC 270.
I mean his big brooding style is a bullyish fighting style.
You know? Of course. Okay. Moving on to the co-main event. I don't want to talk too much about the fight itself because honestly it was a little bit of a ho-hum split decision. But Nick Maximoff, a.k.a. the third Diaz brother, defeating Punahele Soriano via split decision at 185. Did you have any thoughts on undefeated Nick Maximoff?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's playing up the Diaz connection, and more power to him. He's a young fighter who has, guys who can really build his brand. I mean, obviously we're already talking about him as the third Diaz brother, so I think the shtick is working.
Did you hear his interview with Ariel? He sounds like a Diaz.
Obviously. He's obviously, soaking up the Diaz persona by osmosis. You can tell that. But I was impressed with the performance because Soriano's an incredibly dangerous striker. So, while it wasn't the sexiest performance in the world, Maximoff at 7-0, 24 years old, was able to go in there, implement a game plan, and beat a very, very dangerous guy. So that tells me that, A, his cardio is for days as a guy who's going to train with Diaz. So he's going to have that grappling, and while he's young in his before he hits his 30s, he's going to be able to just go and bury guys. Probably similar to a Merab who does that.
Sure.
As he develops. So super impressed. Was it a sexy performance? No, but when you take out a guy like Soriano who's shown the potential that he has, I think that's a big win for him. And I'm excited to see, how he develops. Obviously needs to get more confident in the hands, learn his range a little better and those types of things. But I think that'll come because obviously he's training with legendary fighters who have been in basically every situation that MMA can offer.
Absolutely. In terms of what's next for Nick Maximoff, what do you think of a fight against number 15 ranked Chris Weidman?
I don't want to see Chris Weidman fight anyone.
Fair.
I think that's too much for him. I don't think he needs a top 15.
You think that's too much for Nick? Okay.
What about Edmund Shabazian, who's fallen out of the top 15?
Yeah, I feel a little bad for Edmund, honestly.
But I think I saw on social that Nick actually already has a fight booked, so I'll be interested to see who that is. Not sure it's going to be a big name. He's only
I'm sure it won't be. I doubt it's a ranked opponent.
So, But yeah, I like the kid. I'll be interested to watch him, and his Diaz affiliation will keep me interested for a while.
Okay, moving on to really, I think the big fight that wasn't the main event on the card is obviously Shavkat Rakhmonov improving to 15-0 with 15 stoppages against Carlston Harris. He wins via TKO via spinning hook kick to ground strikes at 4:10 of round number 1. What do you make of this guy? Because a lot of people are saying this dude is a future champ.
I mean, he looks the part. I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. I mean, he's like a champion of, he's got all kinds of credentials. For a fairly young fighter, and just so smooth. He really hasn't been able to be tested because he's so clearly so much better than the guys he's fighting so far. So yeah, I mean, every so often guys come along and they jump off the screen. The Chimaevs, the Rakhmonovs, guys like that. I think he's as good of a prospect as there is in MMA today. Clearly has the look of a title challenger. We'll have to see him tested more. Carlston Harris is, a top 25 guy maybe. So We'll need to see him tested, see him in some trouble spots. I don't think we've seen him even remotely uncomfortable in the UFC yet.
Who would you like? So Shavkat Rakhmonov just broke into the welterweight rankings. He debuts at number 15 contender. Who would you like to see him fight? It's just a few names in front of him. Number 14, Santiago Ponzinibbio. Number 13, Li Jinglang. Number 12, Jeff Neal. And 11, Khamzat Chimaev.
I mean, to be honest with you, all those names sound absurd, but if I had, one that really sticks out?
Huh.
Wonder Boy.
Ooh, that would be is that too much of a jump for him? Because, Wonder Boy's the 7th ranked contender.
I know, but isn't Wonder Boy on a 3-fight losing streak?
Oh, yeah. No, I love the fight, to be honest.
I mean, I think you can make Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Shavkat Rakhmonov as a headliner, a main event, and what that does is it gives you a huge opportunity to build Rakhmonov's name off of a guy like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who everybody loves, and even if he loses, everybody's still gonna love.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so moving on real quick, was there anything else from this card you wanted to touch on?
Always a Brendan Allen supporter. He starched Sam Alvey, who I think's winless in his last 8, so that should probably be the end of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sam Alvey must have some photos of Dana White on his phone doing nefarious things because Sam ain't getting cut, and it's very sketchy. So I don't know what Sam has on Dana, but it's got to be big.
I also call out the Brian Battle Tresean Gore fight. That was the true,
the true
tough finale.
Yeah.
Tresean Gore was talking wild, and Brian Battle just kind of keep chugging away, keep improving. He's got a big frame, a good attitude. I like Brian Battle. I think he'll be an interesting prospect. Gore is obviously the flashy athlete. Maybe has a little bit of a young Uriah Hall in him, but got to put it together. Can't just talk about it.
Yeah, I was going to say, okay, so let's talk about that fight real quick. So Brian Battle, look, I totally get why people like him. He's charismatic. He's really tough. He's tenacious. He's got heart for days. Yeah, I mean, I think he gets hit a lot. I mean, a lot.
Well, he's young. He's a 7-1 fighter. I mean, of course.
Absolutely. Tresean Gore, I was very disappointed with. I'm not going to lie. I had really big hopes for Tresean Gore. And I think for someone who kind of brags about knockout power, he doesn't seem to get a lot of knockouts at all.
You know what I just kind of put together? I think it'd be an awesome fight to see Brian Battle versus Nick Maximoff next.
Ooh, that's fun.
Both 8 fights, one 8-0, one 7-1, both super tough, young in their careers. That'd be a fun one.
That's
kind of like.
Ooh, that's the fight. That's the fight right there.
That's amazing. Yep, and then definitely wanted to call out Julian Juicy J. Arosa. Nobody comes to die on their shield more than this dude. This guy is just kill or be killed every single time out.
Steven Peterson brought it too. That was a crazy fight.
Yeah, well, it's fight of the night for sure. I mean, I've been kind of following Arosa since he was on the Tough series.
Sure.
And again, just super impressed with this dude's resiliency. I've seen him starched a handful of times, and he comes back each time, every time with confidence. Walked through some hell to win this one. I thought he was out there for a second. Steven Peterson, same type of guy, less skilled, but super tough. Yeah, super fun fight.
Absolutely. Okay, are we ready to move on to our preview and picks for 271?
One last thing. Hakeem Dawadu, now 13-2. The guy's got to start as a player, right? Mike Trezano's a good win. Where do you see him going from here?
I mean, I really didn't think that fight was all that exciting. Obviously, Hakeem won via unanimous decision. Credit to him. I thought it was a little ho-hum. Hakeem's extremely talented. So, look, I'd say put him against number 15 ranked Alex Caceres, 14 Shane Burgos. What do you think of that?
I like the Shane Burgos fight. I think both those guys are good in the pocket. That would be excellent.
Okay, all right. Moving on to 271.
Let's do it.
All right. Okay. So, going to start off really quick, and after this fight, we're going to go to the main card. But I wanted to touch on Roxanne Motafari, the Happy Warrior. She's had a really, in my opinion, a really nice career overall. This is her last fight. She's going to retire, win or lose after this, against 8-0 Scotswoman. Is that what you say instead of a Scotsman? Scotwoman? Casey O'Neill.
Yeah, it's a good fight. It's a huge Casey O'Neill fan. I think she's one of the best prospects, but I'm actually leaning Roxanne here. She's tricky.
Really?
Yeah, she's tricky. This is her swan song. She's good on the ground. O'Neal wants to get it to the ground. And we've seen Motafari give young prospects problems before. She has obviously a wealth
Macy
of experience
Barber,
and knowledge.
cough, Macy Barber.
Exactly. So I think I'm taking a flyer on Roxanne this weekend, even though I'm extremely high on Casey O'Neal.
All right, very fair. By the way, I'm taking Casey O'Neal via unanimous decision. Okay.
One more prelim I wanted to call out. Alexander Hernandez versus Hanato Moycano has the makings of a fun fight as well.
Yeah, man, it's crazy to see Hanato Moycano and sort of how far he's dropped. I remember back at UFC 214 when I went live, he was about to beat Brian Ortega, and then he got submitted in the third round. He had a main event against Korean Zombie, got his head taken off there, but he was a huge deal for a little while.
Well, I mean, he's still uber talented, but when you're a guy like Moycano who shows that much potential, you get thrown in there against guys who are elite and experienced, and yeah, he had a couple rough performances.
What did you make of Alexander the Great Hernandez? He was complaining that the fight was on the prelims. He said, "How am I on the prelims?" And I was kind of thinking, chill out, Alex. Go win some fights.
When he started talking about his flaccid penis and Cowboy Cerrone, that's the last thing I ever listened to out of that guy's mouth.
I really wish you hadn't said that, but now you have, so I had to hear it as well. As did all of the listeners. Sorry about that.
Oh, I'm sure anybody who follows Alexander Hernandez knows how obnoxious he is. So, yeah, it seemed on character for me.
Yeah, very fair, very fair. Okay. So, who do you got in that fight, by the way, real quick?
I'm taking Moycano.
Really?
Yeah, I think he wins via submission here. I think they'll probably neutralize each other a bit on the feet. Hernandez may try to implement some wrestling. Moycano can snatch something.
I think Hernandez is going to win a very ugly decision, but I hope you're right, and I'll be rooting for Moycano. So.
Well, we will see Saturday.
We will. Okay, moving on to the main card, the first fight of the main card. It's a fun one. Nasrat Hakuras versus the streaking Bobby Green at lightweight. Who you got in this fight? This is a really fun one.
It is fun, and it's going to be close. There'll be great action in the pocket, but I'm taking Bobby Green. Like you said, he's streaking, and he's just so slick. He has a lifetime of experience. He's so comfortable in there. I think his confidence and how slick he is gives guys a little hesitation, and I think he'll win a split decision here.
Give me Nasrat via KO.
Oh, wow. Come on now.
What do you mean? He had an overhand.
No, I know.
He had an overhand
Nasrat has power, but Bobby Green's kind of hard to
No,
get.
Bobby's great. Oh, Bobby's great. Guys, don't bet on this fight. Do not bet on this fight. But
it's definitely a nice fight for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on. Kyler Phillips 9-2 versus Marcelo Rojo 16-7 at 135 bantamweight bout. Who you got here?
Taking Kyler Phillips. He's shown considerable upside even with a couple losses. I think he's going to continue to improve. I'm taking Phillips here.
Darn it. Me too. Okay, moving on. This is where it gets fun. We were touching on this fight a little bit earlier. Middleweight fight, Jared Cannoneer versus Derrick Brunson. This is an interesting one. A lot of people think this is a title eliminator. What do you make of this, and who you got?
Yeah, I mean, Brunson's looked better as of late, but I just like Cannoneer's power here. Brunson gets hit
he does.
a lot.
He does.
And Cannoneer's a former heavyweight who hits really hard and has really only been beaten by guys who have, significant skills than him. Where I think him and Brunson are going to have similar skills, and I think he'll be able to impose his size and strength and land the heavier shots.
So up until like really earlier today, I was extremely confident that Derrick Brunson was the pick, like the big Vegas pick that people are sleeping on in this whole card. I was like, Brunson's going to beat Cannoneer for sure. I'm less confident now that Brunson has made his little sketchy comment about this is my second to last fight, win or lose. But I'm still going to go and take Derrick Brunson, Fight Geek. I think he's going to grind Jared out. I think he's going to take some big shots. Absolutely he will. I think he's going to look hurt on the feet as he often does. But I just think Derrick's going to fight through it, and I think he's going to grind himself to a unanimous decision.
Interesting. Okay. All right, moving on to the co-main. Derrick Lewis versus Tai Tuivasa. This is an extremely fun heavyweight matchup, in my opinion.
I was going to say, I completely agree. Is this one of the most exciting to look forward to heavyweight bouts that's not for a title in recent years? I can't think of many more. I was so excited. I'm so excited.
Lewis versus Ngannou, obviously that didn't play out how we thought. But this one, just based on the personalities, I don't know that you can get two more endearing fighters together. Because I'd like to see both of these guys win. I love them both. So it'll be fun. Both have the ability to knock each other out, which makes it interesting. Tai seems like the kind of guy who will stick his nose in there and have a fight with Derrick. And I think Derrick knocks him out.
So I totally get why you're saying that. Derrick has a more accomplished resume. The wild card that I'm holding on to here is that Derrick Lewis doesn't seem to do well under pressure as the hometown favorite specifically. They're going back to his hometown. It's going to be...
Yeah, but that's kind of unfair because who did he fight last time?
You saw him crumble under the pressure. He was so stressed by...
It was a title fight.
I just think he's going to be stressed again. I think Ty's going to go in not giving an F like usual, not giving a shit. And I think Ty's going to knock him out in the second round. I really do.
You think Derrick Lewis is getting knocked out?
Lewis has been knocked out many times before. That's actually a misnomer on him.
Not knocked out, cold, maybe TKO.
Yes, agreed. TKO. Sorry, I meant TKO. Yeah.
Because he has a hell of a chin.
I meant TKO. You're right. Thank you for correcting me.
So yeah, what's your formal pick?
Ty, second round TKO.
Second round TKO.
I think Lewis is going to...
Derrick Lewis first round KO.
Lewis is going to fight poorly because he don't like pressure.
Well, the pressure of a title fight in front of your hometown is much different than a 3-round co-main event versus a prospect-ish guy.
I think it's going to be enormous. I mean, it's the co-main of a pay-per-view. Come on, what are we talking about?
Well, here? Ty gets hit, and Derrick Lewis is arguably the hardest hitter in the whole UFC. You think Tai Tuivasa takes 10 shots to the dome from Derrick Lewis over 3 rounds?
I saw Tai Tuivasa put Greg Hardy unconscious while Greg was standing with one right hook.
Greg Hardy and Derrick Lewis are two completely different species when it comes to punching power.
Okay, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, that's not even...
I got Ty. I'm sticking by my pick. King. Despite your bullying... Your on-air bullying. I'm still taking Ty.
All right. Can't wait for that one. It should be fun.
All right. Moving on to the main event. Ooh, I'm excited, guys. Israel Adesanya versus Robert Whittaker 2. What a fight. Why don't you start us off?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had something super enlightening to say so that I could pick Rob, but I just think that Israel will be the sharper fighter. I think Rob lasts to the bell. I think he loses a split decision.
Oh, I'm so upset, man, because that's my pick. I agree.
Oh, Israel by split decision.
By split decision.
I would anticipate Whittaker being a lot more cautious, considering he got highlight reel KO'd the last time. So I think it'll be a very technical fight. We've seen Israel versus Silva and Romero basically just take what he's given and not push the gas down. He's super smart in that way to win fights. So you might see kind of a stalemate unless Robert Whittaker tries to take Israel down. But even then,
he's got to.
I think he will, but I think Israel Adesanya has shown enough to make me believe that he can keep it where he wants it.
Well, remember, taking someone down isn't always purely about getting them down, right? It's about making them have something else to think about, right?
Right, but Israel Adesanya was defending takedowns from Kelvin Gastelum in the 4th and 5th round of one of the craziest wars ever.
Oh, I think
And
Whittaker's far better at taking people down than Gastelum. Just look at the Gastelum-Whittaker fight. Whittaker was out wrestling him left, right, and sideways.
I agree.
So I think Whittaker's got a very real shot, guys. A very real shot if Whittaker, if the best Robert Whittaker shows up, I truly believe he will win by
what
very
if
close
the
decision.
best Israel Adesanya shows up?
If the best Israel Adesanya shows up, Robert's in deep trouble, I think.
Exactly. So if they're both at their best, it's hard to see Robert turning the tide that much.
Yeah.
But like you said, if he's able to implement any amount of wrestling or grappling or control time or anything other than standing in range, that would be great for him.
I think Whittaker he's got to implement his wrestling, and he's got to implement it early. First round, second round, absolutely. He's got to give Israel something to think about, you know?
Yeah, and he's got to land.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think I really think it's going to be a very close fight regardless. I think it'll be nothing like the first. Much closer. I think we're going to the cards for sure. It's all going to come down to in my opinion, how great does Robert Whittaker perform. I'm a big Whittaker fan. I admit that I'm rooting for him. Having said all of that, Fight Geek, I have to admit that during interviews, I think that Whittaker gives off very subtly that maybe he is a little bit intimidated by Israel. And guys, don't get mad at me. Don't get mad at me, Whittaker fans. I'm a Whittaker fan. I'm rooting for him. I think that Israel might be in his head a bit.
Well, I mean, I know what you're saying, but when you've been knocked out by a generational champion,
yeah,
I think you would be insane not to have some apprehension and nerves. He's going into
of course
the biggest fight of his career in his life.
Oh, of course. No one said otherwise.
Israel Adesanya and he gets stopped again. That's a big black mark on his resume,
Absolutely, but that
let alone his pride.
Of course, but that doesn't change the fact that he's got to go out there on Saturday and face it, right?
Right, but a healthy amount of fear can help a man.
That's true, but if it overwhelms a man, then it becomes a distraction.
Yeah, well, we will see. I don't think Robert Whittaker has shown the type of character to be overwhelmed, so we'll see.
We'll see. We will see.
A lot of psychoanalysts going on here.
Yeah, exactly. That is true, actually. Okay, so anything else that we wanted to cover on this card before we move on?
Quick. Andrei Arlovsky's 32-20 versus Jared Vanderaa. I'm taking Arlovsky.
Yeah,
How long do you think he sticks around?
I'm taking Arlovsky. I don't have many thoughts on this fight, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, yeah. What did you want to say about this ho-hum fight?
Well, I mean, it seems like Andrei Arlovsky's on the card every 9 to 12 weeks religiously. So I'm just wondering, I mean, how long do you think the guy can do it?
I don't know. He's had 52 fights now. That's a lot of fights.
And I think like 30 of them are in the UFC.
Yeah, I mean, look at that record, 32-20. That's a lot of fighting.
It's workmanlike.
Absolutely. But
anyways, yeah, I think this would be a good opportunity maybe for him to stop a lesser opponent and maybe have a nice swan song.
Absolutely. I think that'd be great, but do you think that if Andre wins, he'll retire? I mean, let's be honest. Is that how most of these fighters do things? They never retire when they should.
Well, what's rough is that if he wins, he's due for a tougher opponent.
Exactly.
But he'd be on a 3-fight winning streak, so I'm sure he would, pretty much consider himself back in the title mix.
And that's my concern, right?
Exactly. So I guess that's kind of why I was bringing it up. We can move on.
Okay, all right. So, guys, with that, we're going to take a really quick break, and then we'll be back with listener questions and more. Hey guys, it's Phil the MMA Dude letting you know that this episode of the Split Decision Podcast is brought to you by TotalAggressionClothing.com. Visit www.TotalAggressionClothing.com and use the promo code 46210 to receive a special Split Podcast discount on all Total Aggression hats, shirts, hoodies, and more. Again, that's www.TotalAggressionClothing.com with promo code 46210. Hey guys, it's Phil the MMA Dude back with the Split Decision Podcast, episode number 124, here with my always brilliant co-host, The Fight Geek, and it is now time for my favorite section of all, and that is... Listen up!
Coming with the extra oomph tonight.
I'm trying to bring that extra energy, bro. Okay, so our first question comes from our man, a Split Podcast OG, Eduardo. That's at Landa Crew. Guys, give him a follow, Eduardo, at Landa Crew. He says, are you guys tuning in to see Misha Tate on Celebrity Big Brother? If not, which fighters do you keep track of in regards to their non-fighting activities? Hashtag AskSplitPod. Love this.
Yeah, good outside-the-box question. Appreciate it. Absolutely not tuning in to Big Brother for
Neither
any
am
reason.
I. I haven't seen any of it.
I think I tuned in 12 years ago for the first season or something, and that was the last time
We
I
all
paid
did.
attention.
We all tuned into season 1.
Exactly. So, interesting that Misha's shooting a TV show while she has a fight booked.
I was wondering about that a bit. I was wondering about that.
Yeah, but no, not tuning in for that. But which fighters do I keep track of outside of the cage? The first one I would probably say is Michael Bisping, Chael Sonnen, Nick Diaz.
Yep, Chael's my favorite podcast. I never miss You're Welcome with Chael Sonnen. So him, and then you go...
I follow Rich Franklin. He's over at 1 now, but, he's very well-spoken. He's a good guy to follow, very informational, uplifting, cool dude. So
I'm lucky enough to consider, Gilbert Burns a friend. So obviously I definitely stay in touch with him and follow what he's doing very closely. I don't know if that counts, Gilbert Burns. I mean, not that many for me, to be honest.
Right. I think another one in Valentina Shevchenko, She's a cool lady. I mean, she's showing up everywhere. She's got her guns. She's traveling. She looks great. She's an unbelievable fighter. So I keep tabs on her too.
Yep. I'm really trying to think because I feel like I'm not naming enough. I mean, Max Holloway. Who doesn't keep? I love following Max Holloway. He's got a gorgeous new wife. He's awesome with his kid. Everything about him is cool. I follow him closely.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them we could go through, but I mean.
Yeah, I can tell you this. I can tell you which fighter I used to follow closely, and I just completely, not only did I unfollow them, but I've muted their name, is Conor McGregor. I could care less what he's up to.
I'm trying to get away from the Conor news.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, I was like, how can I escape learning more about Conor?
Like, it's not news that Conor is oddly posturing in his mirror.
Everyone's like, oh, look at this video of him and how stoned he is while he eats an ice cream sandwich. I'm like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. I'm okay.
What's separating him from Jake Paul at that point?
Yeah, it's like, everyone, look at how stoned he is while he eats this ice cream sandwich. I'm like, I don't have to see that, though.
It's not that, more power to him if that's what he wants to do with his social media. What's hilarious is that that's, like, such news.
Oh my God, it's huge news.
It's a conversation point for people.
Absolutely. Which is totally ridiculous, of course.
Right. But anyways, Conor McGregor, it's Conor McGregor. Someday we should just have like a roundtable discussion about him because what an odd career arc. And to see where and who he is today based on who I thought he would become is just kind of bizarre. I think it feels like he missed it just a touch, even though he's obviously rich beyond his wildest dreams. But I think the glory and some of that stuff he kind of misplayed.
Should I? I'm going to go ahead and go against my gut here and break the fourth wall slightly. Little known split decision podcast fact, guys. When me and Fight Geek were first getting to know each other, I'm going to say it anyway. We bonded over our mutual like of Conor McGregor. Everyone's going to judge us so hard for that, but guys, that was so many years ago. But
yeah, I mean, the truth is I mean, the early Conor McGregor ride was
awesome,
as exciting as any fighter or athlete I've ever encountered in my life.
Absolutely,
so it was really exciting. But
all the listeners know that. They're like, yeah, we know.
Yeah, we're just waxing poetic, and we were trying to talk shit, and we ended up building him up. All right,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Which shows you how powerful he's become. But okay, so this question comes from our man Juice. Love Juice. He's got a great show, guys, Friendly Sparring Podcast. Make sure to check that out. So this is at Friendly Spar Pod. He says, if Tai Tuivasa beats Derrick Lewis, will you two do a shoey on air? Please say yes. #demand split pod.
I think it's a great idea. If Tai Tuivasa beats Derrick Lewis, yes, on air next week, I'll do a shoey out of one of my own shoes.
Damn! Juice just got Fight Geek to agree. That is huge, Juice. Wow, Juice the man. You know what? Now I can't say no. I was going to say no. I was going to look for a way out, but now I can't. Fight Geek just put me in a bad position. I got to say yes.
Well, you're picking Tai to win, so that means you technically want to do the shoey.
Didn't say that.
No.
Didn't say that.
All right, so yes, I agree to that. I think that's fun.
All right, we both agree.
I don't see Tai winning, so I don't think we'll have to do it. But yes, great call. Thanks for the question, Juice.
Wait, I'm suddenly extremely concerned about Tai winning. I don't want him to. I don't want him to win anymore, dude.
You don't have to be too worried. He's gonna get knocked out.
All right. Yeah, we'll see. Okay. So this next question comes from my man Cyrus King. Love this guy. That's at MacTavish Clan. MacTavish Clan. He says, this is a great one. Who wins, Prime Anderson Silva versus Prime Izzy? #AskSplitPod.
Prime Anderson Silva. I believe that
absolutely,
very firmly.
I mean, look, Anderson's
guys. People really don't give Anderson the credit he deserves. Obviously, he's from a different era. He has the PED surrounding him towards his late part of his career.
Oh, whatever. It's not like he was John. He didn't get caught like the John Jones amount.
No, well, he didn't test positive for anything until he snapped his leg in half.
Exactly.
And most of the guys that he was beating during his title run, i.e. Chael, his biggest rival, were so juiced to the gills that it was unbelievable. So,
yeah, I firmly don't think that I don't think that he hurt his legacy like, let's say, Jones, did.
Because I think his title defenses are, 10-3 versus Izzy? Anderson Silva won
10-4. I think Izzy's got 4 now, I believe.
Think about the way Anderson Silva treated 205ers compared to the way Izzy kind of was dealt with by a big 205er in Jan. But I would take Anderson Silva in his prime to beat Jan today at 205. That's how explosive and quick he was.
I firmly believe that Anderson would beat Izzy fairly easily in his prime. And Izzy fans, before you get upset, I would just point to the fact that, look, they fought for 3 rounds many pay-per-views ago, and obviously Anderson was far from his prime, and he still took a round. It was 2-1. So,
right, and still was. It was competitive. Fight, but his skills still translated. Anderson's skills still translate to this day in boxing. The guy is a virtuoso striker. The things he did, the way I think if you think back, he's a finisher, but he's not the type of finisher Anderson Silva was. Anderson Silva could hit you with so many different things. He submitted Dan Henderson and Chael Sonnen. He found ways to win. I think he won a fight versus a reverse up elbow. I think he was disqualified for it. But Anderson Silva's the god of striking in the UFC as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that Anderson would definitely beat Izzy if prime to prime.
Could it be a very technical decision where Izzy fares very well for
I mean,
himself
it could be.
and doesn't
It could
get
be.
stopped, I think that's probably what you'd see.
Okay. I mean, yeah, it could be. I also think there's a chance that Anderson would finish him, frankly.
Yeah, well, I don't think we've ever seen a fighter as confident as Anderson was in his prime. I mean, Anderson Silva walked up to basically every fighter he ever faced with his hands down, kind of just like daring them to fight him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so moving on to our next listener question. This comes from our man, Zan Bando. That's at Zan Bando99, a great MMA journalist out of the University of Illinois. Give him a follow, guys. He really knows his stuff. He says, hey, fellas, welcome back. 2 questions per usual. Number 1, what UFC 271 fight isn't getting enough love? And 2, what's your favorite UFC viewing moment? And what I mean by that is there a UFC party or gathering that you attended that you'll never forget? If so, what made it great? #AskSplitPod. So let's start with question number 1 about UFC 271. Which fight is not getting enough love? I'll go ahead and say it. I think Nasrat Hakuras versus Bobby Green is not getting enough love. That's a great fight. That's a really close fight.
It is a great fight. I know Hernandez had some speaking time at the press conference, but I mean, that's a solid fight that could be on a main card of, a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Alexander Hernandez versus Moycano could be on any main card.
And by the way, I could even throw in Derrick Lewis versus Tai Tuivasa, and maybe you guys are saying, whoa, Phil, what do you mean? It's the co-main event. Yeah, it's the co-main event. Neither of them have talked about it. Neither of them have built it up. So it feels like a sleeper to me.
Exactly.
So, even Cannoneer Brunson. There's a lot of 271 fights I could name there, to be frank. But anyways, number 2. What is your favorite UFC viewing moment? That could be a UFC party or gathering that you attended that you'll never forget. If so, what made it great? I've got a pretty clear answer here. I'll let you start off.
Okay. Yeah, mine is UFC 189.
No, you did not just call the same card as me, dude. You did not just call my card.
I think that's the most epic.
No, that's what I was going to say.
Well, don't let me go first, because 189, I was shoulder to shoulder with friends in a whole local bar. It was madness. The Rory McDonald fight versus Robbie Lawler was madness. Conor coming back versus Mendez was madness. It was Conor building his legacy. It was as fun as MMA has ever been for me.
Guys, we pride ourselves on not talking before the episode so that things can be really organic and we can have organic chemistry and organic arguments. And this might be the weirdest coincidence we've ever recorded, because I can't believe he says it 189. I was gonna say 189, man. And the biggest reason, of course, Lawler McDonald 2 is probably my second favorite UFC title fight of all time. And then on top of that, I clearly remember I'd been watching McGregor rise up, and I still wasn't a total believer in him. I believed in him, but I was not convinced he was going to beat Aldo. Then Aldo pulls out. He gets the Chad Mendes fight late notice. Chad Mendes basically wins that first round 10-8 almost. And then he's dominating the second round on the ground again. And Conor's just talking shit from the bottom, getting beaten up. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, Conor's finally getting exposed. And what happens? McGregor stands him up with 10 seconds to go and knocks him out. I'll never forget the viewing party I was at, because there were like 50 people there, and that was just insane to me.
Yes, for sure. And then, Conor did answer some questions there. It was the wrestler, and it was all that stuff. And then overcoming the adversity and the way he came back in that iconic pose where he's looking at Chad and he waves him on, and then he finished. What a night of fights. Something I'll remember forever. Like I said, I was with probably 300 people shoulder to shoulder, and we were all just hanging on by the end of our seats. It was just madness. So I'll never forget that night. I know we were bashing Conor, but a couple a couple honorable mentions. Conor versus Diaz 2.
Everyone watched it. Everyone and their mom watched
I watched that fight again. Absolutely packed bar. Everybody
Same.
absolutely on their feet. Just
Same.
Nobody really knew who was winning that fight. So again, Conor in his heyday was about as fun and as exciting as it got.
This is
Yep. Ronda Rousey getting knocked out by Holm.
Oh yeah.
Was a fun one because that was legitimate shock. I was in shock.
Those are very good ones. Yeah, obviously McGregor Diaz too. I remember I was on a trip to Seattle, Washington with my girlfriend at the time. We were at the very end of our relationship. We were not getting along, and the best memory of that trip for me, bar none, was insisting that we go to a bar for that fight, because it was, when I say packed, Fight Geek, I mean, you couldn't even, it was person to person, you couldn't even move an inch, and it was incredible, the energy.
Yeah.
So
yeah, fun reminiscing.
Wait, really quick. I've got a second place I want to name.
Okay.
So my first, this was really, obviously I'd been watching the UFC. I was a big Uriah Faber fan already, but in terms of the fight card that got me into watching it, semi-religiously, that would be UFC 135, Jones versus Rampage, September 24th, 2011. I'll never forget going to the bar to watch that with my friends. A lot of people in the crowd thought the Rampage was going to win, and everyone kept whispering, "Oh, I heard this Jones kid is really good. This Jones kid is special." And I said, yeah, let's see. Because I was a bit of a casual. I'll admit it. I was a bit of a casual at the time. And boy, did Jones prove it with that submission in the 4th round. Oh, my God.
Over Rampage?
Yep.
Are you talking about Lyoto?
No. UFC 135, Jones versus Rampage.
All right.
John Jones, I believe.
Oh, yeah,
unless
right,
I'm insane,
okay.
Won via submission in the 4th round. Unless I'm insane.
Long time ago.
Oh, yeah. That was in 2011, back when I first moved to California.
Nice. Well, yep, those are some. I mean, I could even go all the way back to, my Tito days when, he, fought Chuck Liddell, even though he lost those fights. I mean, those were really the nights that spawned my love for the sport and just how dramatic it could be. So, yeah. Yep,
absolutely. Okay, so moving on. This question comes from our man, another Split Podcast OG. That's Jacob Powers. That's at Jacob Powers 2. He says, #AskSplitPod. Do you guys think Fight Night cards will ever get back to having more than one fight with top 10 fighters? That's a really fair question. No.
Probably
no,
not.
Probably
because
not.
It's just not viable. It seems like what they're using the Fight Night cards, obviously they want, big name fighters to headline them, but they're really populating the Fight Night cards with the hand-picked prospects that are coming through the Dana White Contender Series, Tough, and things like that. So the Fight Night cards are moving forward gonna be a lot of the rest of the field, and then on the pay-per-views and in the big numbered events is where you're going to get the guys who have the more lofty salaries.
Absolutely, but it's such a good and relevant question from Jacob, because back when we started this show almost 4 years ago, if you can believe it, Fight Geek, because when I saw this question, I actually went back and looked at a few of our early shows back from 2018 or whenever it was. It was 2018. And you know what? Even that recently, because that really wasn't that long ago. Even back then, they had 4 to 5 fights that were basically extremely sexy, high-level contender fights on fight nights, and those days are over.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna get Shavkat Rakhmonov feature fights where he knocks people out in the fight night.
Sure, but he wasn't even ranked when this fight happened. You see what I mean?
That's what I'm saying is you're going to get the guys prior to being ranked kind of, that's the slot in their career they're going to get. You're going to get the Nick Maximoffs on those cards. You're going to get the Casey O'Neills on those cards, and all of that field until they prove that they jump into the top 15 and they're worthy and have, you know, the kind of following that goes on, you know, a big card.
Absolutely. Yeah. So an amazing question, Jacob. I'd love to say yes to your question, but, you know, as me and Fikey kind of just discussed, I don't see them going back to that. No.
I don't either. I think you're going to get a lot of prospects, and the fight nights are going to build the prospects, and then once they graduate, a lot of them will be featured on the big cards.
Absolutely. Okay, so with that, do we have any questions left? Listener questions left?
I do not believe so. That's it.
All right. So with that, Fikey, take us away, baby.
All right, guys. As usual, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, Stitcher, and more. I'm at the Fight Geek MMA. He's at Phil the MMA Dude. We are at Split_podcast. It's 4 words. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week. Peace.